Hi, and welcome to Mental Health, the Up&Up. My name is Anna. I'm your host, and we're here today with Geraldine Peterson, licensed mental health care counselor. Get me all my words in there. And we are talking about the basics of mental health care and mental health. In this show, we're going to talk about everything from depression to relationships to um, PTSD, but for right now, we are focused on just the basics of what mental health is and what mental health care is and how to get started and all that. Geraldine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Geraldine. I've been a therapist for over 25 years. I've worked in a variety of areas in the counseling field with children and adults, individuals and couples and families, groups and classes. Um, the people I've worked with have shared the ideas that they like, the ideas that work for them. And I'm here to share those ideas with you. So a quick disclaimer before we get started. I'm a therapist, but this isn't therapy. These are ideas for you to think about on your own or talk about with your own therapist.
All right, so we're going to dive right back in again. So last week we talked about um, what mental health care is, or what mental health is, and what it is that you do when you go and see a counselor. So we wanted to follow up today with part one of how to find a counselor. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So kind of going a little backwards. First, what is counseling? And then like, okay, that's what it is. How do I actually get to it?
exactly.
So today I was going to talk just about kind of the nitty gritty, that like the process of finding a counselor. Um, and in a future episode, we'll talk about how to make sure that counselor is a good fit. There's actually quite a bit of information out there about how to literally reach out and find a counselor. And like I
See,
say, in the future, we'll talk about how to make sure that counselor's a good fit.
see, and it's interesting that you say that because until meeting you and starting to work with you, I had absolutely no idea how to find a counselor or a psychiatrist or anything. Like I didn't even know what the options are or where to look. So,
Yeah. Yeah. People, yeah, if you move to a new city and you need a dentist and a doctor or a hairdresser, we typically know how to do that. How to find a counselor is a little trickier. It's not quite out there.
mhm.
So, yeah, today we're going to give you the up and up about how to find a counselor. So, and what you just asked, I want to preface this with you mentioned as counselor or psychologist. So, I'm going to start first by explaining the difference between all the terms counselor, psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, counselor, psychiatric med management. All those things are so confusing.
Yeah,
Um, so, and again, counselors know what they are, but the general population doesn't.
right.
So, in the mental health field, the level of person that you go in and say, "Hey, I have this problem with depression and anxiety. Can you help me out?" is usually called a licensed mental health counselor. And that means they've gone to college for 4 years, they've gone to graduate school, and they've had 2 years of supervision. It's a little different in different states, but that's generally the idea. Now, the word counselor is what people typically use. However, counselor also is a word that people use for like legal counsel and
Hmm.
or psychic counselor or a spiritual counselor. So when you're looking for a mental health counselor, you want to look for that word therapist. And that means it's more in the medical area, like physical therapy helps with your physical health, and mental health therapist helps with your mental health. So you generally want to look for um, a counselor who has a graduate degree and has your state's terminology, which is most probably licensed mental health counselor. And that's the level 2 that insurance company accepts. So, Anna, you could say, hey, I'm going to start charging people $50 an hour to come and ask my advice about things. And you could say, I'm Anna, your helping counselor, and that's, you can do that, and other people aren't going to know the difference. The
Right.
insurance companies are going to know the difference, and they're not going to reimburse you. So you want to look for that level. And then psychologist, I emphasize the call of that word. Psychologist goes to college longer.
Oh, okay.
So a psychologist is called a doctor in psychology, but they're a doctor like you have a doctor of economics or a doctor of communication. They're not a medical doctor.
Hmm.
And again, doctor is one of those words that we tend to use meaning medical doctor, but it also applies to having a doctorate degree, a PhD in just about any field. So you can be a doctor of economics, a doctor of psychology, a doctor of uh, world religions. You can have a doctorate. That doctor cannot prescribe medication because
Okay.
they're not a medical doctor. Psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So a psychiatrist can set broken bones, they can birth babies, they can prescribe migraine medication, although that's not their specialty. They probably should be careful about things like that. But just
Yeah.
like a podiatrist works mostly with your feet or whatever, a psychiatrist works mostly in the mental health field, but they went to medical school. So technically, yes, they could set a broken bone. They could birth a baby.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for medication, you want to start with either your regular doctor and then get a referral, or you want to look for a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner who can often prescribe medication, a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And that's very different than a therapist, a mental health therapist. Is that all making sense?
That's super helpful,
Yeah.
honestly, because again, being new to the area of mental health and
Mhm.
especially the care of it, yeah,
Yeah. And
there's a
I
lot of
get,
terms that we don't know.
right, right. And they're terms that, again, I'm familiar with. And I do get calls sometimes for clients seeking um, medication. And
Mm.
I usually do take the extra couple of minutes to call people back and say, hey, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner, or you can just start with your regular doctor. Just like you would if you had a problem with your skin, you'd start with your regular doctor, and then your doctor would say, your regular doctor would say, hey, it's a little outside my scope. I'm going to send you to a dermatologist.
Mm.
So with mental health medications, you go to your regular doctor and maybe they'll be able to prescribe a medication, or maybe they'll say, hey, it's a little out of my scope. I'm going to send you to the specialist doctor, the psychiatrist.
Okay.
And typically psychologists, just because of the way the field works, they're the ones who do a lot of the testing and testifying in court and uh, determining whether someone's eligible for special education because of a mental health issue and things like that. They typically don't do sit down talk face to face
Ah,
therapy.
gotcha.
They can, they just make more money doing the testing. So most
Right.
most of them end up doing the testing. So that said, it is it isn't kind of intuitive about how to find a counselor. I am uh, at the age where typically I would say look it up in the yellow pages, which is not a, there's probably some yellow pages app or yellow pages website out there, but
There
um,
is, yeah.
you can do a web search to look for a counselor. Psychology Today is currently one of the biggest um, websites that most counselors kind of advertise with. They have like their name and information on there. Um, and it's Psychology Today. It used to be a magazine. So if you look up Psychology Today, there'll be a little tab, Find a Counselor. And you can search by area or name or specialty, and then it'll just generate a list for you. Um, and currently, most counselors have their own websites, so you could probably look up, counselor in your area, just like you would look up pizza in your area. That's not necessarily going to give you a comprehensive list, and it's not necessarily going to give you a list of the counselors who accept your insurance.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm going to move on to that next then, even though my outline is a little different, but this started a little different. So just like anything else, you can do a web search through Psychology Today or just on the web, mental health therapist near me. But the criteria that you kind of want to make sure the therapist you choose to see meets um, is truly just going to be, do they take my insurance? So if you search for a counselor and you find one and you say, oh man, I really like them, and then you find out, I have, X insurance and they don't take that insurance,
Mm-hmm.
that's a real bummer. So besides looking up on, Psychology Today or just a cold lookup on the website, you can contact your insurance company. And all insurance companies have websites, and all insurance companies have telephone numbers, customer support numbers. And if you look at your literal insurance card and you turn it over, on the back of the card is usually where the insurance company puts their website address and the phone number to call for um, uh, customer service. And again, the search is pretty easy. If you have United Healthcare, look up United Healthcare. I am a I am a member. So if you look it up online, um, all the insurance companies' websites are going to be a little different, but all of them are going to have some sort of search bar that says, I'm looking for this kind of specialist. So if you're looking for a dermatologist, you put in dermatology. If you're looking for a podiatrist, you put in podiatry. If you're looking for a mental health therapist, you put in mental health therapist, and it'll generate a list of names that accept your insurance.
Mm.
And that to me is the best first place to start, because that's the difference between paying your copay, which may be $10 or $30 or something, and paying out of pocket, which may be over $100. So
Yeah.
um, for most people, it's much more affordable to pay that copay than to pay completely out of pocket. um, some insurance companies do have the psychiatry tab. They do lump therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists together.
Mm-hmm.
So if that gets too confusing and you're not quite sure, you can call that customer support number or do a chat and ask the person at the insurance company end, just, can you help me sort through this?
Okay.
I say that like insurance companies don't love to spend their time that way, but it is their job to spend
Mm-hmm.
their time that way, and to help you find the services you need. So if you are struggling, you can ask the insurance company representative to help you out with narrowing that search down um, to the services you're actually looking for. And even if you're having trouble finding someone to help you the insurance company can actually call the mental health therapist and say, hey, on our website it says you're accepting openings, but are you, or you have openings and are accepting new clients, but are you actually accepting new clients? Um, it's most mental health therapists work in private practice or in small groups, and uh, so the availability changes very quickly. So on Monday, I can have 3 openings, and by Thursday, I have 0. I have a waiting list, because
Mm.
3 people called. That's not a lot of people when I'm one person, right?
Yeah.
So even if the counselor's website or the insurance company's website says that mental health therapist is accepting new clients, that could have changed between, Monday and Thursday, or between Monday and Tuesday. So, regardless of how you find like the therapist you might want to see, um, you I suggest that people call like 5 or 6 therapists and say, hey, are you accepting new clients? And we'll talk a little bit later about what to leave on the message, but to find out if they do have openings. Because again, the website can say they do, but in reality, they just got a call 10 minutes ago, and that person took their last slot.
Right.
So yeah, I really do think the best place to start is through your insurance company. Again, because for most people, that's the most limiting. Uh, that's the most limiting area is the cost.
Yeah.
Um, besides besides your insurance company, a lot of workplaces have what's called an employee assistance program, which they may call an EAP, and that stands for Employee Assistance Program. And I kind of describe that as mini insurance. So most companies know that they lose um, they lose employees' work time, and if employees are too stressed out, or employees make more mistakes, if they're struggling with a mental health issue. So many companies, especially larger companies, contract with a company that has on-call mental health therapists that you can um, that you can talk to, usually for pretty short-term issues. They usually say, from 3 to 5 sessions, we'll provide this for free. Um, and again, that service is free to the employee and to the employee's family. So if your workplace doesn't have an EAP, your spouse's workplace may have an EAP. And that's another kind of real formal place to go to get connected with a therapist pretty quickly. Uh, Go ahead, Anna.
Um, on that note, and kind of tying back to what you said before about how a counselor is a very broad term, one of my previous employment packages,
Uh-huh.
the EAP program, it had, you could have 5 separate sessions
Mm-hmm.
with a counselor, but the counselors they had on hand were legal or mental health, or I think there was a third one,
Economic.
and economic, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, which is interesting, and so I'm glad that we started by making sure that we know what we're talking about.
Yes. Yes. And they're all called counselors.
They
Economic
are. Yep.
counselor, legal counsel. Yeah.
And you may need any of their services, but specifically for mental health, make sure that's what you're asking for when you use your EAP benefits.
Yeah. And if you don't know whether your company has an EAP benefit, you can ask your human resources
Mm-hmm.
department or person, or check. Most people get employee handbooks. I have personally never read an employee handbook all the way through, but it's pretty easy to find out if they do have that service. And then you get a phone number, you call that phone number, they kind of run through what you're looking for. And they, again, usually do provide a limited number of free counseling sessions. And I encourage people to use absolutely the legal counseling service. Again, it's not the same as hiring a lawyer. It's for
Right.
pretty quick questions about, I don't understand this term, or, uh, just a real quick thing. But then also you can hire that lawyer. And the economic counseling, if you're in debt or if you're struggling paying off credit card bills, it's a free service through your
Hmm.
employer. Because again, the employer knows that if you're stressed out about paying off your credit cards, you're going to make a few more mistakes. You're going to be a little grumpier at work. You might miss more work days. So it's to their benefit to help you sort out your, what's causing you stress. Um, the A couple of points about EAPs is, one is your workplace contracts with a separate company. Those counselors are not associated with your company. So according to HIPAA, the kind of privacy laws,
Hmm.
those counselors cannot report back to your boss, your coworkers, the human resources department, even in your company, even that you accessed their service,
Hmm.
let alone why you access their service. They do report back to the company like demographics, like 13 people used our services, 10 of those people used our mental health therapist, and 2 used economic, and 6 were women, and 5 were over the age of 50 or whatever. They report back demographics, but real general demographics, and absolutely nothing specific about you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, yeah. That privacy is a big issue, especially if your issue is with maybe a coworker, you know.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing that I'll say about employee assistance programs is that usually they have a limited number of sessions that they'll provide for free. Um, After you use those limited number of sessions, you can stay with that therapist. If that therapist accepts your insurance, you then just move on to seeing that therapist for a longer period of time, with the first couple of sessions being free and then the next sessions being billed through your insurance.
Okay.
So when you do call your EAP, one of the questions you want to ask, if you think that issue might go longer than the couple of free sessions, is, if I stay with this counselor or this therapist, do they take my insurance?
Mm.
Because you don't want to see a therapist for 3 sessions. You're kind of just getting warmed up with that person, and then all of a sudden you have to switch to a different therapist because the one you started with doesn't take your insurance. Um, and I said one more thing, but it was actually 2 more things. Um, the other thing to know about the EAP services is that it is a certain number of sessions, but that's a certain number of sessions per person, per issue, per year.
Oh,
Yes. And again, a lot of people don't know that.
yeah,
So
no. Yeah.
yeah, it's super helpful. So you can call in January for an issue with, grief. And then you can call back in March with an issue about a workplace conflict. And then you
Mm.
can call back in November with an issue about, um, you know, you think you might have ADHD. So uh, also, you can call in January with an issue about grief, and your spouse or child, depending on who's under that program, which your human resources person is going to know that, or the actual employee assistance program is going to know who's eligible to use their services. So your spouse or child can call back in January with an issue about their, a school place conflict, or um, their own issue. So it's per person, per issue, per year. I think it's a very underused resource. And
I
again,
would agree.
it's free. So, so um, kind of going back through kind of a more formal or professional way to find a counselor or a mental health therapist. I'm going to try to use that word. Is again, you can go to your medical doctor and say, I may or may not think I need medication, but I do think I need someone to talk to.
Hmm.
Who, doctor, is on your list of therapists in the area that you might recommend? Um, and besides your uh, I call it regular doctor. I think the term is
Primary care physician.
physician. Thank you.
I was trying to remember
Which,
the words.
yeah, that's why I said regular doctor. um, Besides your doctor, there's a lot of people that you may come into contact with who are not at all mental health therapists, but uh, who see people um, who sometimes have issues with mental health, and that can be like a school counselor, or that can be your massage therapist, or kind of the joke, your hairdresser. People talk about their problems to their hairdresser. Your hairdresser may have some recommendations,
Mm.
because they know that that's not their job.
Right.
But people do kind of talk about personal issues to um, those professions or in those settings. They may talk to their massage therapist about why they're why their muscles are so tight. It's because of stress. It's because of emotional stress.
Yeah.
And the massage therapist is, may chit chat with you, but may have a therapist to refer you to.
Mm.
Um, and again, it could be anywhere from a different doctor that you see, or a different type of counselor, like a college counselor or a school counselor that you see, all the way to massage therapist, nutritionist. Emotional issues sometimes affect our nutrition and our eating, our um, physical therapist. So you can ask around in those kind of adjacent professions if somebody has a therapist that they recommend.
So I do have a break-in question
Hmm.
um, on the in the hope of destigmatizing and making all of this a little less scary for those of us who don't know much.
Hmm.
There are a lot of, I'll call them horror stories just because there's not a less dramatic term for
That's
it.
fine.
There are a lot of horror stories of people who have mental health struggles who go to their primary care physician, their medical doctor, and feel like their needs are dismissed.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, is that fairly prevalent, and how do you cope with that when that's what you're running into?
That is definitely more prevalent than it has any right to be.
Mm.
And besides an adjacent profession minimizing your um, mental health struggles, I see it even in the mental health field,
Mm.
which, yes, I hear the sadness in your voice. It's
Yeah.
so sad. Um, and we'll talk about that a little bit next time when we talk about finding a therapist that's a good fit.
Okay.
There is a certain amount of advocacy or self-advocacy that goes on, um, unfortunately, in searching for mental health care. Um, I've also seen that with physical care, though. So there definitely is some self-advocacy that goes on. And I would say any I was going to say any professional or any practitioner that dismisses concerns that you have, But I would expand that to any friend or family member who dismisses concerns that you have. That's not the person to ask advice from.
Mm,
You know, if you're not getting the answers you need, ask somebody else, ask
okay.
somewhere else. Uh, but yes, that I think happens more often with mental health concerns, but unfortunately, it happens also with physical concerns. So if you're not feeling like you're getting the services you think you need, or an explanation, a reasonable explanation that makes sense to you
Hmm.
about why you're not getting the services you need, um, find someone else, bring a friend with you. Another thing that people don't realize is not only in mental health therapy, but in your doctor's appointments, you can bring someone in with you. You know, that happens a lot, like with serious medical issues like cancer. A lot of times people will bring a
Hmm.
support person in, but you can bring a support person in for a dermatological issue, if you don't feel like you're being heard.
Right.
Um, and you can ask to talk to someone else, or again for that explanation.
I love the idea of bringing a second person in with you because it's so hard for many of us to just think of all the questions we should be asking in the moment, at the
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I grew up being the young thing that I am. I grew up with when HIPAA was really starting to become a thing and
Uh-huh.
medical privacy was becoming what it is now. And I remember being a teenager and having doctors and nurses look at me weird because I wanted my mom in the room, because apparently that's not typical for teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the whole point was I'm a teenager. I don't know what to ask. And
Yeah.
I don't know how serious this complaint that I have is. My mom has a little bit more life experience
Mm-hmm.
and she has my well-being at heart. And that's not the case for everybody. I do realize that. But that
Mm-hmm.
safe person who you could bring with you.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adult, you just don't think to do that because you're
Right.
supposed to be independent. So I love that you said that. It
Right.
makes a big difference.
I'm an adult, older than your mother. I'm much older than you. I'm fully comfortable in my role as adult, and my dishwasher broke, and I'm
Hmm.
not fixing it myself.
Right.
I'm calling someone to fix it. I have a tax service. I'm an adult. I can do my own taxes. I'm not particularly good at it, so I ask for help. Um, I actually, it was you, and I was looking for a new car, and I asked you to come with me just as a
Yeah.
second person in buying a new car. I fully feel comfortable in my role as adult. It's nice to have another person there. And it's
Agreed.
strange that in some areas people really accept that, and in other areas they kind of, it's stigmatized to bring a support person.
And a lot of those areas that are stigmatized are kind of silly. Like I remember when I first became an adult, financial aid for college. I was just
Ah,
supposed to magically know how to
hmm
navigate all of that.
hmm
And yeah.
It it's one of my it's really stronger than a pet peeve. It's one of my soapbox foundational complaints in life that the organization that the customer, consumer, patient, or whatever goes to knows their system, knows their policies, knows their field.
Yeah.
The consumer doesn't.
Right.
You know, if I'm getting a divorce, I'm hopefully only getting one divorce,
Right.
and my divorce lawyer has done, hundreds of divorces. So they hand me a piece of paperwork and they say, fill out your this blah, 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 blah. They know what that is and what it's for and what it means and how to do it. I've never done it before, so I don't
Exactly.
know what it is. Yeah. So, um, uh, one of the reasons I hired the person who does my retirement fund is when I first met with him, I talked to him for a little bit. He asked, do you have any questions? And I said, no, because I didn't know what to ask.
Right.
And he very sweetly slid over a piece of paper across the desk to me and said, these are the questions you should always ask someone who has access to your money.
I
What
love
is
that.
your degree? Which I hadn't even occurred to me to ask.
Right.
It hadn't even, he had a shingle out that said financial planner. I
Hmm.
believed him, you know, um, but probably I could I could advertise as a financial planner with absolutely no experience and ask for people's money.
Right.
So he says, he just slowly slid it over. These are the questions you should ask me. And I did. I ran down the questions and said, oh, yeah, good point. What is your degree? What do you know about finances? How
I love
long
that.
have you been working? What happens if you abscond with my money? Um, Again, how am I to know that? I don't.
Right.
I have one retirement account. He does hundreds.
I love that so much. I wish more people in more fields of study did that. Um, and that actually ties into one of our later podcasts that we plan to do is what questions should you be asking your counselor? I don't remember if that's going to be the next one or the one after, but I
Yeah,
know that's
well,
on the list of things we wanted to talk about.
for sure. Um, I'm gonna when new clients come to me for the first time, I do run over some real basics about counseling. Like some people come in and they even, I don't know if they're joking or not, but I've had people say, do I lie down on the couch? And maybe some counselors in some settings you do. In my office, you don't.
Right.
So I just explain it very um, like they don't know anything about the field. The same thing about finding my office. My office is a little difficult to find because of the streets. And
Hmm.
I know everybody has GPS, but sometimes the GPS sends them 2 buildings down
Yeah.
for some reason. I haven't figured out why. So I will explain it very clearly to them. The building is green. You'll walk up the steps. There's steps to walk up. It's a white door. It has
Right.
a sign on it that says this.
Hmm.
Now, I know all of that, but when you're going to a new place, you're struggling already with some crisis, so maybe your brain isn't working at its best. It's nice to have those little things. And I try not to forget that because I've walked into my office thousands of times.
Hmm.
This is the first time someone new is walking in. I even said, I had a new client yesterday, and I said, you'll walk into the waiting room, and I usually say, I don't have a receptionist. I have a bell. I will hear the bell.
Hmm.
Wait in the waiting room. There's a red couch.
Right. So
So
that they know
just
they're in the right spot.
right. They know they're in the right spot. They know there's a bell. They don't have to knock on a door or shout out for me. They know not to expect a receptionist. Yeah.
I super appreciate that as someone. I have this very specific anxiety tick
Mhm.
where when I'm walking into a room, especially if it's a public space, even if it's somewhere I've been a billion times,
Mhm.
I kind of get tunnel vision.
Mhm.
And I tell my husband he's my emotional support human because what I do is I walk into the room and I beeline for him, and I can't take in anyone else in the room
Uh
until
huh.
I found my spot with him. It used to be my parents, now it's him.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
and it's though when we first got married, there were a couple of times when I beelined in and I didn't see him, so I just went and found his chair really, really quickly and just kind of
Mhm.
sat down. And he's like, "Okay," and he moved to where I was. But point being, like I say, that tunnel vision, having a
Yes.
visual something to look for when I get in, because you walk in the room and you're like, oh my God, am I in the right spot? Is this the people that I should be saying hi to? What's going on? There's so much to take in. There's the
Mhm.
red couch. Okay, I'm in the right spot. I can sit on that red couch. She told me about the
Mhm.
red couch,
Mhm.
and that just helps. So,
And it's actually not as odd a quirk as you may think it is. I
oh,
get that when I walk into um, maybe not so much Starbucks because Starbucks tend to be very um, they're all set up kind of the same. But if
mhm,
I used to do school visits and all schools are very similar but different.
yeah,
So I'd be there like, okay, which hallway do I go down? But if you walk into a deli, they're all set up just slightly different. Do I take a number? Do I not take a number?
right.
And I'll tell you the other funny thing. about the tunnel vision, especially when something is new, and especially when something is stressful, and especially when we are generally under stress.
Mm-hmm.
When I see new clients, I'll see them for maybe 3 to 5 sessions. And then in that third to fifth session, this happens maybe 80% of the time. They'll say, "Oh, when did you get that picture on the wall?" Or, "Oh, there's a blanket here that I can use. When did
Yeah.
you add that to the office?" And I'll say, "That's been here from day one. You've just never noticed it because you were so focused in on the
On what was here.
conversation and what
Yeah.
and yeah, your internal stress and the discomfort of the situation, that you
Right.
didn't even look around and notice what was on my walls, or the blanket that's been on my couch always." Because people have different temperature levels, I always have a blanket in my office.
Yeah.
um, I'll tell you the funniest, I think it's a super super funny experiment they did, where they got preschoolers, well, maybe kindergarten age, like 5-year-olds, and they brought a 5-year-old into a room, and on the table was a box that had pictures of candy on it. It looked like a box of candy.
Mm.
And before they opened the box, they asked the child, "What's in the box?" Or, "What do you think is in the box?" And the child would say, "Candy." And they would open the box, and they had filled the box with pencils. And so the child goes, "Oh, okay, pencils." They put the lid back in the box. They ask a second 5-year-old to come in. And they asked the second 5-year-old, with the first 5-year-old still in the room, they asked the second 5-year-old, "What do you think is in this box?" The second 5-year-old, looks at the box with pictures of candy on it and says, "Candy." The first 5-year-old goes, "Idiot," to the second 5-year-old, maybe not saying those words, but
Right.
truly expresses disdain at the stupidity of that second 5-year-old, who doesn't know the thing that they've never been exposed to before in their life.
Right.
But because that first 5-year-old knew the answer, they think people who don't know that answer are particularly dumb. And that's not true. It's just that they've not had the same experiences. So I just like that it illustrates, like what you were saying. You walk into a new room, you don't know whether you're supposed to sit on the red couch. You don't know whether you're supposed to knock on the door or ring a bell. You don't know whether that your therapist knows you're there or not, if you don't
Yeah.
know they have a bell. And it's again one of my real strong pet peeves, that people who've been in that system act like that first 5-year-old. And
Right.
when other people don't know the system, they roll their eyes and say, "Oh, this is so easy." It's easy because you already know the answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a one of my favorite quotes. And I knock on wood. Don't quote me. Don't quote me
Don't
on this.
It may be a misquote.
It may be a misquote. I believe it was Einstein, but it may have been someone else who said, could have even been Mark Twain. I really don't know. The quote is, the mark of truly knowing your subject is that you can explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Or
Yes.
so that's
Yeah.
that's how you know you've truly gained fluency over whatever your subject is you can explain it to a layman who's never been exposed to it ever before.
I like that quote, whoever said it. Yeah. Or that misquote, whoever didn't say it. Yes.
It's a great thought anyway.
Yes. That's very, yeah, I like that quote.
So I'm gonna wrap us up here because we're hitting time. But
Okay.
I did have a couple of questions I wanted to make sure that we touched on at the very least.
Hmm.
Um, we already covered if I think I need someone to prescribe meds. You said you're a medical doctor or a
Hmm.
psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner.
Nurse practitioner, just like when you go to your primary care physician, a lot of times you'll see a nurse practitioner
Hmm.
that can prescribe medications. There's psychiatric nurse practitioners who can
Okay.
prescribe psychiatric medication. Yeah.
And then the other question is, what are my options if my insurance doesn't happen to cover mental health care, which is getting more rare, but is still a thing.
So there, I do not know exactly when, but there was something called the Mental Health Parity Act. And parity means, it kind of means on par with equality.
Oh, okay.
So that I honestly don't know the answer to this, but I don't think your insurance can not cover mental health care.
Okay.
It's under the umbrella of medical care. Now, the second part of that is they may charge an exorbitant amount for your copay, or you may have, but just like an insurance company can't say you can't see a dermatologist,
Mm-hmm.
we may charge more for that because we consider them a specialist, or we may not cover as much of the cost. But mental health is under the umbrella of medical care, and I believe, again, don't quote me on this one, but most insurance companies do have a policy for mental health. If they don't, which probably means you have a real kind of catastrophic insurance policy where
Mm-hmm.
it only covers just real serious things and may not cover dermatology, then most states do have state insurance that will cover mental health care. You would contact them through the Department of Health in your state, or find out
Okay.
more information about that through the Department of Health in your state. Again, you can look on their website, you can give them a call. That's if you want to go through official channels. The other thing you can do is you can call your insurance company and say, hey, I have this medical need of mental health therapy. I'm confused that you're not covering that. What are my options?
Okay.
Insurance companies, um, there's always loopholes to everything, but insurance companies are required to ensure that there are enough providers available to you to meet your needs. So if you live in rural Idaho and you have this rare heart disease and the only hospital that covers it is in Florida, your insurance company, again, don't quote me on the legality of this, but I believe your insurance company, even though the doctor in Florida is out of network, if there's not a specialist in your area, they have to cover someone out of network
Mm-hmm.
if you have that medical need. And again, because of the Parity Act, mental health is considered a medical need.
Okay.
But if you're running into roadblocks, you can contact the Department of Health in your state. You can call your insurance company and ask them. You can talk to the provider you already have. And
Mm-hmm.
again, this may be the first time you're asking that. This is probably not the first time they've run into that issue.
Okay.
You also have the option, many therapists do accept private pay, and many therapists have sliding fee scales for low income. Therapists just tend to be people who like to help people, so they realize some people just can't afford it, and they keep a slot or two open for low income people.
Mm-hmm.
Many colleges who have counseling programs have programs where you can see a student counselor, someone who's needing experience in order to get that license. And often that is a sliding fee or free service. Um, so you can call if there's a college in your area that has a counseling program, that graduates people to go on to become mental health therapists. You may be able to find a lower cost or free service there. I definitely look into an employee assistance program.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would ask those adjacent professionals, and if you're really, really stuck, if you call 988, which is the National Crisis Service for Mental Health, it's like 911, but for mental health issues, or the crisis services in your area, the local crisis line, or the crisis line, depending on what you're seeking services for. There's a domestic violence crisis line. There's um, there's kind of different subsections of crisis lines. Most crisis lines have a really comprehensive list of resources in your area. And
Okay.
again, because they've heard most of those questions many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time you're asking that question, but they'll have a list of like resources in your area to reach out to.
Okay.
Okay.
That's really good to know.
Yeah. And again, you can call the 988, the crisis line number, if you're not in like immediate kind of crisis, and just tell them, I'm here calling about resources. And if they don't have that, ask them. Well, then who does have that list of services in the area that are low cost?
Okay.
And they should be able to help you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That is a
The
lot of
last thing,
information. Very good.
yeah, it's a lot. I was there like, oh, this will be just a part of a podcast. No, it's a whole podcast. Before we go, I do want to say that when you call your therapist, you will probably get an answering service of some sort, because most therapists are in therapy. A lot of therapists don't have receptionists. And since you're calling 5 or 6, waiting for a call back, the information that therapist likes to know for you to leave on that message is your name, your phone number, of course, what insurance you have, because again, they'll know if they take that insurance. A very, very short description of why you're seeing them. Therapists, if they get 5 calls a day for new clients, they don't have time to listen to a 10-minute explanation. So just a super, super short, and then general times you're available for counseling. If you're specifically looking for evening sessions, say that. Or if you're only available on Mondays, say that, because that'll make a difference about whether that therapist would be able to see you.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up for today. For more information and resources, please check out our website, upandupwellness.com. We have handouts. We're going to have some follow-up pamphlets that go along with these podcasts. So as you want more information, do look out for those. We have some books, booklets, and other resources just to help make mental health care simple and kind of fun when it can be.
Yeah.
If you are in crisis, as we just said, the National Mental Health Helpline is 988, and you can call them whether your crisis is big or small, as Jerry just said. So we'll catch you all next week.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye-bye.